Welcome back to the deep dive. I was looking through our catalog recently, and I realized we have a bit of a pattern.
Oh, yeah.
When we sit down at these microphones, we usually fall into one of two very specific modes. We're either, playing the historian, dusting off the archives to explain how a system was built 100 years ago,
Right.
or we're playing the diagnostician. We're standing over the patient, this broken political system, and pointing out exactly where the bone is snapped.
It's the classic trap of just admiring the problem, isn't it? We can describe the car crash, like high-definition, frame-by-frame detail, but we rarely spend enough time talking about how to actually fix the break so it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. And the diagnosis part is fascinating. I mean, I love a good messy history lesson, but it can leave you feeling a little bit cynical. You just stare at the mess, you shrug, and you think, well, that's just how it is. But today feels different. We've got a source in the stack today that isn't really looking backward. It's actually proposing a way forward.
And not just a vague, wouldn't it be nice if we all got along kind of proposal. The material we're diving into today, it's called A New Lens for Ethical Scrutiny, is surprisingly specific. It's looking at one of the oldest, maybe weirdest parts of the UK political system, the House of Lords.
Right?
And it's asking a very practical question. If we stopped obsessing over tradition for just 5 minutes and asked, how do we tidy this up?
Yeah.
What would we actually build?
I love the framing they use right at the start of the text. They say, think of this less as a manifesto.
And more as something to put on the table and walk around.
Yeah, that's a great image to keep in mind for this deep dive. It sets the stakes perfectly. This isn't a demand for a revolution tomorrow.
No, it's a thought experiment. It's an invitation to look at a broken workflow and just say, okay, if we could redesign the plumbing of Parliament just a little bit to make it actually work, what would we change?
So that is our mission today. We are going to put this specific proposal on the table, this new lens, and we are going to walk around it. We're going to poke it, prod it, and see if it holds up.
And the core of it seems to be one really big, maybe slightly counterintuitive idea.
Which is?
Separating technical scrutiny from ethical reasoning.
It sounds a bit abstract, I have to say. A little like management consultant speak.
It does, I know.
Yeah.
But when you unpack it, it explains so much about why modern politics feels so gridlocked and, why arguments seem to just go in circles.
Okay, so let's start with the diagnosis then. Before we get to the fix, we have to understand the break. The source identifies a specific muddle in the current system. What is going wrong in the House of Lords right now?
The diagnosis is surprisingly simple. The source argues that we are currently asking one institution, the House of Lords, to do two very different jobs at the exact same time.
Okay.
And because they're trying to do both, they struggle to do either of them perfectly.
2 jobs, 1 house. Break that down for me.
Okay, let's call them Job A and Job B. Job A is the techno side. This is what the House of Lords is supposed to be famous for.
Yeah.
You want a chamber that revises legislation, spots drafting errors, finds technical flaws.
Taps the brakes a bit when a bill is being rushed through the Commons too quickly.
Exactly. That's Job A.
Right, the scrutiny part. Making sure the law actually functions mechanically. Like, does this clause contradict that one? Or is this definition legally watertight? That sort of thing.
Precisely. It's about mechanics. It's quality control. But then you have Job B.
Okay.
And Job B is the ethical weight. We keep leaning on that same chamber to raise moral concerns, to look at long-term risks, and to ask those really uncomfortable questions about right and wrong that don't fit neatly into the daily rough and tumble of party politics.
So on one hand, you need them to be copy editors and lawyers checking the fine print. And on the other hand, strictly by default, you want them to be philosophers and moral guardians asking, but is this the right thing to do?
Precisely. And the source makes a really insightful point here. Those roles, they overlap, but they require totally different headspaces.
Yeah.
Forcing them to live together in one chamber creates this kind of cognitive dissonance.
It reminds me of, well, it's like asking your plumber to fix a leaking sink. They're under there with the wrench, tightening the pipes, doing the technical work.
Right.
But at the same time, you're standing over them, expecting them to give you profound life advice about the direction of your marriage.
That is actually a surprisingly accurate analogy. The skills required to fix the pipe, technical expertise, precision, all that, are completely different from the wisdom required to ask if you're living a meaningful life.
And we've just mashed these two things together in the Lords.
We have. And the source argues we've been circling this confusion for decades.
And looking at my notes here, the source suggests that right now, the ethical part, that Job B is a total mess. It says ethical reasoning usually only appears when something goes wrong.
Or when a debate gets heated. It's entirely reactive. It's not built into the process. It's an emergency brake.
Yeah.
We rely on the bishops who sit in the Lords,
The Lord spiritual.
right, or retired judges, or just specific people who happen to be in the room to stand up and say, wait a minute, is this actually ethical?
But that feels so accidental. Like we're just hoping the conscience of the nation is awake and in the chamber at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday.
It is accidental, and that's the danger. If the conscience of the nation relies on whether a specific person had a coffee that morning and decided to speak up, that's not a system.
That's luck.
It's luck. And in a modern democracy, dealing with things like AI, genetic editing, climate change, relying on luck is a very bad strategy.
Okay, so that's the muddle. We have a reactive accidental ethics committee hiding inside a legislative revision chamber.
And the result is that often neither job gets done well. The technical stuff gets bogged down in moral arguments, and the moral arguments get lost in technical jargon.
We're asking the mechanic to be the philosopher, and then we get annoyed when the car isn't fixed and we don't have a philosophy.
Exactly. And that brings us to the new lens.
And the fix. The source says we should imagine doing something fairly straightforward. Now, usually in politics, straightforward is code for incredibly complicated. What are they actually proposing here?
The proposal is this. Stop asking the House of Lords to do both jobs by default. Instead, you create a separate body. A body whose sole purpose, its entire reason for existing, is to be openly and explicitly ethical.
A dedicated ethics body. Now, I have to stop you there, because as soon as I hear ethics body, my alarm bells just start ringing.
Sure.
It sounds like a ministry of truth. I imagine a group of people in robes telling the elected government what they can and can't do. It just sounds, well, undemocratic.
And you're not alone in that fear. The source anticipates that reaction immediately. And this is where we have to be really, really careful with the definition. The source is extremely specific about what this body is not.
Okay, give me the do not list. What can this body not do?
First, this is not a moral authority that's handing down verdicts. It's not a Supreme Court for ethics.
Right.
Second, it is not a rival parliament trying to outvote the House of Commons. And arguably the most important point, it does not have a veto over legislation.
Wait, they can't stop a law, even if they think it's morally bankrupt, even if they think it's a disaster.
No. They cannot stop anything. They can't force anyone to do anything. They have zero legislative power in the traditional sense.
Man, I'm playing devil's advocate here. What is the point? If they can't stop a bad law, aren't they just a talking shop? A place for people to blow off steam while the government does whatever it wants anyway?
That's the intuitive reaction, isn't it?
Oh.
If you don't have a veto, you don't have power. But the source argues that power works differently here. They define the body's role as creating visibility.
Visibility.
It's a place where ethical questions are expected to be raised, worked through, and made visible as a normal part of political decision-making.
It's about changing the default setting.
Exactly. Instead of just hoping a bishop is in the room and awake when a bad bill comes through, you have a body where the expectation, the whole mandate, is that the ethical dimensions get examined before the law gets passed.
This brings us to the section on how it works. The source talks about a shift in timing. Because right now, ethical arguments usually happen at the very end of the process, don't they?
They do. The source uses the phrase, smuggled into amendments. I think it's such a telling description.
Smuggled. That sounds sneaky, like they're hiding the ethics inside the technical language.
They have to. Currently, if you're a lord and you think a bill is morally wrong, you often can't just stand up and say, this is wrong. That's seen as, political posturing. So you have to find a technical loophole or propose a minor amendment to a specific clause just to try and slow it down.
You're trying to fix a massive moral issue by tweaking a sentence on page 40.
Which is incredibly messy and dishonest in a way. You're arguing about commas when what you really want to argue about is justice.
And it's too late by then.
It's too late. The new lens proposal suggests that if you have this dedicated space, these questions show up earlier. So when a major policy is proposed, something with long-term consequences like AI regulation or assisted dying, the ethical dimensions are part of the conversation from day one.
So who is listening to this body? If they can't veto laws, who are they actually talking to?
The source says the audience is everyone. It sits alongside Parliament, not above it. It's speaking to MPs, to peers, to committees, to journalists, and, to the wider public. It's creating a public record.
And this is where we get to the core metaphor of the entire document. The title is A New Lens, and they explicitly contrast this with a lever.
Lens versus lever. This is the key. This is the key to understanding why this might actually work.
Break that down. A lever is about force,
A
right?
lever moves things. A veto is a lever.
Hmm.
A vote is a lever. You pull it and the machinery stops or goes. This body doesn't have levers. It has a lens.
And a lens.
A lens focuses attention. It magnifies things that are small or hidden. It clarifies things that are blurry.
I like that distinction because in politics, things are often blurry on purpose. Governments like to hide the trade-offs.
Exactly. Governments love to say, there is no alternative, or this is just a technical fix. A lens forces you to look at the details. It says, actually, there is a huge ethical trade-off here. We are prioritizing efficiency over privacy, or we are prioritizing current spending over future generations.
So the power isn't in forcing the government to stop. The power is in making sure everyone clearly sees what the government is doing.
Yes, it ensures that when a decision is made, it's made with eyes wide open.
Yeah.
You can still choose to ignore what the lens shows you. Parliament is sovereign, they can do what they like, but you can't claim you didn't see it. You can't claim ignorance.
And this would seem to solve that identity crisis for the House of Lords we talked about earlier, the two jobs problem.
It does. I mean, the source argues this is actually a lifeline for the Lords. If ethical reasoning has its own clear home, the Lords can be judged fairly on the job they actually do, which is legislative review.
Right now, if the Lords block something because they think it's wrong in a moral sense, they just get hammered in the breast.
They get called unelected interlopers, frustrating the will of the people. You hear it all the time. Who are these people to tell us what's right? But if they don't raise those concerns, they get dismissed as irrelevant rubber stamps. It's a complete lose-lose situation.
So if you move the ethical heavy lifting to this new body, this lens, the Lords can just focus on being really good technical revisers.
Exactly. The source says it allows them to focus more cleanly on legislative review. It stops them from being the accidental conscience of the nation and lets them be the expert mechanics they're supposed to be.
I really like how the source puts it. That doesn't weaken scrutiny. It clarifies it. It's basically specialization.
It is.
You don't want your mechanic worrying about the philosophy of transport. You want them fixing the engine. Let the philosopher worry about where the car is going.
That's the logic. Separation of duties makes everyone better at their specific job.
But, and here is the reality check, does this actually fix politics? Because, let's be honest, it sounds a little bit polite. Here is a lens, please look through it. What happens when a government with a huge majority just says, thanks for the memo, we're doing it anyway?
The source is remarkably honest about this, and I think that's why this document is so interesting.
Yeah.
It doesn't promise a utopia. It admits that this proposal doesn't make politics tidy. It doesn't make disagreement just vanish.
So they acknowledge that the advice might just be ignored.
Explicitly. They say sometimes the reasoning will be ignored, sometimes it will be mocked, sometimes it will reshape a bill. But, and here's the key value proposition, it makes the argument more honest.
Honesty over tidiness. That's a rare goal in political reform. Usually it's all about efficiency.
But think about the narrative shift. The source describes it like this. Instead of the headline saying, the Lords are being awkward again.
Or the government is rushing this through.
Right. The conversation becomes, we were warned, the ethical trade-offs were set out, and we chose this path anyway.
That feels huge. That's about accountability.
It is. It creates a clear record. Even if the bad policy goes through, there is a document produced by this body that says, here were the ethical risks we identified at the time. 10 years later, when things go wrong, you can't say, whoops, we didn't know.
It eliminates the excuse of ignorance. It forces politicians to own the moral weight of their choices, to actually say, yes, I know this hurts X group, but I am doing it because I believe Y is more important.
Exactly. It treats the voter like an adult. It says, here are the stakes. And in the long run, that might be more powerful than a veto. A veto just stops a bill today. A clear ethical record changes the culture of how decisions are justified.
That's interesting because usually when we talk about reform, we talk about power struggles. Who gets the vote? Who gets the final say? This is a reform about information and attention.
It's a reform about the quality of the debate. It's saying that we accept we will disagree on what to do, but can we at least agree on what the issues are before we vote?
So, to recap where we are, we've gone from a muddle where one house is trying to be both a lawyer and a priest,
Right.
to a proposed separation. We create a lens, a body that sits alongside Parliament, focusing attention on the ethical stakes without claiming the power to veto. It clarifies the Lord's role, and it forces honesty in the Commons.
That is the proposal on the table.
Yeah.
It sounds elegant, It sounds logical.
I feel a big butt coming, don't I?
There's always a but.
The source ends on a cliffhanger, a series of questions that they don't answer. And honestly, they are the questions that make or break this whole idea.
They are the million-dollar questions. Because the theory is sound, the lens metaphor is beautiful. But the source acknowledges that if you were even half serious about this, you immediately run into the practical nightmare.
We know what the body is, we know what it does, but we have absolutely no idea who the body is.
Right. Who actually gets to hold the lens? The source asks this directly. Who sits in this room? Is it philosophers?
If it's philosophers, you run the risk of it becoming an academic seminar that no one listens to. Just people arguing about utilitarianism versus deontology while the country is on fire.
Right. So is it religious leaders?
In a modern secular society, that's going to be controversial immediately. Which religions? How many of each? It becomes a math problem of representation.
Okay, so is it retired judges?
Then it just becomes another legal chamber. We already have plenty of lawyers in politics.
Or, and this is the trendy idea, is it random citizens selected by lottery? Like a jury service for ethics?
Which is democratic. Sure, I like the idea of regular people having a say. But do they have the expertise to analyze complex bioethics legislation? If you're discussing the ethics of gene editing, do you need a PhD to even understand the question?
Exactly. Every option has a flaw. This is the Goldilocks problem of political reform. And then, once you pick the people, you have the tenure question. How long do they serve? If they serve too long, they become out-of-touch elites.
But if they serve too short, they don't build up the expertise or the reputation to be taken seriously. They're just tourists.
And the biggest question of all, which the source leaves us with, how do you stop it from becoming either toothless or overbearing?
Let's unpack that. Toothless means...
Toothless means everyone just ignores the lens.
Mm.
The body produces a beautiful report, it's 50 pages long, it's morally profound, and the government just chucks it in the recycling bin without reading it.
It becomes a waste of money.
A total waste of taxpayer money.
What?
But if it's too strong, if it's overbearing,
If
if it's too strong, even without a veto, if its voice is too loud, if its prestige is too high, it starts to look like a rival government. It starts to look like the Council of Elders telling the elected officials they are immoral.
And in a democracy, that is a very, very dangerous dynamic. You don't want unelected people shaming the representatives of the people into submission. That feels like we're going backward.
It's a fascinating puzzle. We've solved the structural problem. Separate the tasks. We know that separating technical scrutiny from ethical scrutiny makes sense. But we haven't solved the human problem.
Who do we trust to tell us what is ethical?
Exactly. And that is where the source leaves us. It doesn't give us the organizational chart. It doesn't give us the resume requirements. It just says, here is a better way to think about the problem. Here is a structure that makes sense. Now, you figure out how to staff it.
It's the ultimate put it on the table and walk around ending.
It is. They've built the concept car. They've explained the aerodynamics. They've shown us how fast it could go. But they haven't put an engine in it yet.
And I think that's the right place to stop. Because it forces us, the listener, to do the work. We can't just critique their staffing plan because they didn't give us one. We have to imagine it ourselves.
It transforms you from a passive consumer of information into a participant in the design. You have to ask yourself, if I could pick 5 people to hold the ethical lens for my country, who would I trust and why?
So, that is where we leave you today. Not with a finished blueprint, but with a challenge. We have the new lens. It offers a way out of the confusion in the House of Lords. It promises a more honest, transparent politics where trade-offs are visible, but it requires a specific group of people to hold that lens steady.
So, as you go about your day, ask yourself, who would you put in that room? And how would you ensure they amplify the truth without drowning out democracy?
That's the question to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.